This is Discovery Class. Thank you for dropping by. My topic today, did you do your best? When Jimmy Carter graduated from the Naval Academy at Annapolis as an engineer, he was interviewed by the U.S. submarine commander for a position with the atomic submarines. His name was Admiral Rickover. Carter entered his spacious military office, walls decorated with vast naval awards, pictures of the latest U.S. arsenal of ships and submarines on the wall. Nervously, Carter was shown a seat in front of Rickover's large, crowded desk. Carter was dressed in his starched white naval officer's uniform. Rickover began the conversation by saying to Carter, "I understand, Carter, that you want to enroll in our atomic submarine patrol. Is that right?" "Yes, sir." "I do, sir," said Carter. "Well, tell me, Carter, what was your class standing in your graduating year?" Carter said, "Sir, I came fourth in my class of 411. There was a large period of silence. Rickover went on, "Now tell me, Carter, did you do your best?" As he asked the question, he stared Carter right through with his steely eyes. Carter replied, "Yes, sir. I did, sir." "Well, no, sir. Not always, sir." To which Rickover replied, "Why not?" He said, "I came first in my class of 365. Did you do your best, Carter?" We have all been encouraged to do our best ever since we were little. Whether in school, doing our chores around the house, or when we were asked to help somebody else. When life throws you a pandemic, how do you do your best? When you are asked to isolate yourself from others, social distance, how do you do your best? You're locked in your house, no one can come in, no one can go out. And if you come out and you wear a mask, and you have to be very careful. Whatever life throws at you, you can't fight it. You have to face it head on, and you've got to somehow keep going. Martin Luther King was asked, how do you do your best in the midst of segregation, shooting, lootings, police brutality, prison? King replied, "If a man is called to be a street sweeper, you should sweep the streets even as Michelangelo painted, or Beethoven played his music, or Shakespeare wrote his plays. He should sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will pause to say, 'Here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well.'" Tucked away in the Old Testament, in the book of 2 Kings, there's a story about 4 men who did their job well. You've probably never even heard the story. Never has anybody else. I'm going to read the biblical narrative as found in 2 Kings 7, verse 3 and following. And the story unfolds just outside the city of Samaria. The city is under siege. They're being attacked by the mighty army of the Syrians. And the king of the Syrians is a man by the name of Ben-Hadad. The Jews inside the city gates and ramparts are in desperate strait. Food is run out. All the grain for the flour has been used up. People are starving. Famine has set in everywhere. The enemy is about to break in. There's panic in the city. They thought that maybe the houses and the shops and the army barracks was a safe place, but nothing was safe. There's nothing safe inside the city. Now, let me pick up the story here in verse 3 of 2 Kings 7, and it reads like this. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we know we'll die. And besides, they won't let us in anyway because we're lepers. So we're stuck. But if we stay here and die, that doesn't make sense. So let's go over to the camp of the enemy. Let's go down to the Syrians. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, we die." Tell me, how do you do your best when you're in that kind of a mess? Doing your best is really a virtue. It not only fills us with a sense of accomplishment, but it serves to strengthen us, the good things in us. It takes resolve, takes determination, takes focus, takes perseverance, as well as a great deal of self-discipline. Things such as patience, honesty, ingenuity, and being thoughtful and considerate of others are also required. And sometimes it even involves blood, sweat, and tears. Before I tell you how these 4 lepers did their best, let me ask you a question. When did you face having to do your best? These pandemics and these economic times in which we live, had they brought the best out of you? In 1980, the Winter Olympic Games were on at Lake Placid, New York. The gold medal for ice hockey had been won 4 straight Olympics before this one by the mighty Soviet Union of Russia. The United States hockey team was made up of only college players. They came from little colleges in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Massachusetts. They were the youngest team in the tournament. If there ever was an underdog team, they were it. Their coach was a man by the name of Herb Brooks. The gold medal game came down to the match between the Soviet Union and, of all things, the United States underdogs. Every television set in the Soviet Union was on because they knew that their team, the champions, after 4 straight Olympics, who would beat them? Al Michaels was the Foster Hewitt for the NBC television network. He was the broadcaster. The unthinkable happened. Those young college kids defeated the mighty Soviet juggernauts by a score of 4-3. As the game wound down to just a few seconds left, Al Michaels, in his excitement, he sent out over the airwaves, "Do you believe in miracles, U.S.?" The game ended. The U.S. won the gold, and it's been forever known as the Miracle on Ice. It became the top sports event for the 20th century. Coach Herb Brooks was asked, "How did you choose a team of no names with no National Hockey League experience, just kids? How did you know who to pick? What was it that you said to them when they came into your office and you said, 'Yep, you can play defense, you'll be on the forward'? What'd you tell them?" Brooks said, "I look for people first. I looked for athletes second. I wanted people with a sound value system to be on my team." He said, "You can't buy value. You already have that good deep inside you. You can't buy it. I learned early on that you don't put greatness into people. It's already there. Your job is somehow to pull it out. Those of you that have been in leadership, you'd agree with that, wouldn't you? Jesus said, He chose the foolish things of this world to confound the mighty. And He said, we're going to take the things that are not to bring to naught the things that are. What He was saying was, I choose people with value, and they're going to give me their very best. I want you to watch how God takes 4 lepers. And they've been hiding outside the wall of Samaria. They haven't got a chance. And He's going to pull from them greatness. And you wouldn't expect greatness to come from 4 lepers, would you? Let me read. Chapter 7, verse 5, and going down in 2 Kings. So, after the sun went down, the 4 got up, and they went to the camp of the Syrians. When they got to the edge of the camp, there was a surprise. There was not a man in the camp. The place was empty. God had made the army of the Syrians to hear the sound of horses and to hear the mighty army of somebody else's army on the march. And they heard this. And they told each other, I'll bet the king of Israel has hired the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians, and they've been hired by him to come and attack us. Panicked, they ran for their lives through the darkness, abandoning their tents, abandoning their horses, abandoning their donkeys. The whole camp was empty, running for their dear life. The 4 lepers, they entered the camp and they went into a tent. First they ate, and then they drank, and then they grabbed silver, it says, and they grabbed gold, and they grabbed clothing, and they went off and they hid it. Probably they dug a hole in the ground. They came back and they entered another tent, and they loved it, and they looted, again, hiding all their plunder. Now I have a question. Do you think that was a good thing to do? Finders keepers, losers weepers? What do you think? Do you think they were doing their best? Looting, hiding, grabbing more, taking everything for themselves? None of it really belonged to them, but they thought it did. Verse 9. Interesting word. Finally. Isn't that a cute word? That's a good word for this story. Finally. They said to one another, we shouldn't be doing this. This is a day of good news. And we're making it into a private party. If we wait around until morning, do you know what's going to happen to us? We're going to be punished. Come on. Let's all of us go back and tell the news to everyone back in the city of Samaria. They're back there starving and they're dying. And look at us. We're having the time of our life. Have you noticed in our failures and in our difficulties, we often learn life's greatest lessons? In our adversities, we grow up stronger. We learn how to be better, how we develop our strong moral character. Have you learned that? Mahatma Gandhi, that great leader in India, he said that strength does not come from winning. Your struggles develop your strengths. And when you go through hardship and decide not to surrender, that's your strength. Sometimes our tribulations, even though they're hard, They may be your greatest gift. We have seen our lives turned upside down with this virus. It's called COVID-19. Some have even lost loved ones. Having been mandated to remain within our confines of our homes, with loss of human contact and companionship as well. But since we've been forced to slow down and to put everything in our life on pause, perhaps we can view this as an opportunity to take a good look within. Take a look inside. Who am I really? That's what those 4 lepers learned. We shouldn't be doing this. This is a day of good news. We've got to be sharing the good news. That's what the text says. In the ancient world, they believed that tribulation befell a society. And if it did, it was really a wake-up call. It was a warning to the people that the morals and the values of society had degenerated to a dangerous point. It was understood that when the people recognized their wrongdoing and they felt sincere and remorse and were determined to improve themselves and do what is right and do what is good, the calamity would resolve itself and the blessings would follow. That's what the ancients thought. You and I each have a purpose. We have a resiliency and goodness within us. And when we experience difficulties, when things are tough, or they don't turn out the way we'd like, it's then that we learn. Falling down and picking ourselves up is part of that whole process. We learn to do better, and in that process, we learn to be better people. Last week, Duchess Meghan Markle gave a graduating address to her old high school grade 12 students down there in California. She was very nervous as she approached the microphone. She was in Los Angeles when the protesters were on the streets, way back in her time. And the death of George Floyd had affected that whole city now, but she remembers that it affected a city many years ago. Now, Duchess Markle's mother was black. Her father was white. She came from a mixed-race family. She remembers that in 1992, there were riots in Los Angeles. It was known as the LA Uprising. It began with arrests and beatings. Rodney King was the black man who faced what George Floyd faced in this recent rebellion. There were 6 days of looting, arson, assault, murder. 63 were dead. 2,300 were injured. Thousands arrested. Property damage was over $1 billion. Unrest ended only when the National Guard entered the city of LA. Duchess Meghan Markle began her address to her fellow classmates with this. She said, "The first thing I want to say to you is that I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I want to say to you that you have grown up in a world where this is still present," she said. "I remember the curfew, and I remember the rushing, and I remember the drive home from school that day and seeing the ash fall from the sky. I remember seeing men in the back of vans holding guns and holding rifles. And I remember pulling up to the house here at home and seeing the tree that had always been there completely charred. Those memories don't go away. I can't imagine at 17 or 18-year-olds now, you people, that you would have to have a different vision of that very same experience. As I talk to you, I can't imagine that I'm talking to you like I was talked to all those years back when I was in junior high that day when I came home with my mother in the car to our house, and I witnessed what you're witnessing right now. Megan added, I'm sorry that in a way we have not gotten the world to a place that you deserve to have better. Turning her focus to the way she remembered people coming together to support one another during that '92 riot, she called on this new generation of graduates to lead with love and to lead with compassion and to use their voices for a much better future. We are seeing people stand in solidarity, she said. We are seeing communities coming together and to be uplifted. And you are going to be part of that wonderful movement. Megan added, I know that this is not the graduation you envisioned. And this is not the celebration that you wanted. But I ask you now, there is a way for us to reframe this for you and I and not see this as the end of something, but instead to see this as the beginning. You're going to harness all that work you've done. All those values that your parents have taught you, you're going to carry those. All those skills that you have embodied over the last 4 years here in high school. And now I'm going to ask you to channel that. Now all that work is going to get activated. And now you're going to be part of a rebuilding. The Duchess concluded, I know some people say, how many times do we need to rebuild? Well, you know what? We're going to rebuild. And we're going to rebuild. And we're going to rebuild. And we're going to rebuild until it's rebuilt. Because when the foundation is broken, so are we. I began our class today by asking you that question. Did you do your best? I told you the story about 4 hidden lepers. No names, we don't know their names. Hiding outside the city wall of Samaria. God took them by the hand, and he showed them a new beginning that was just out of this world. Do you know that's what God can do for you? In the midst of all this calamity, he has something out of this world for you. I don't know what it is, and you don't know what it is. Would you let him take your hand? And would you let him show you what it is? Until next time, I'll look for you in class to come back.